Well, good day to you. Let me get my microphone settled here. Good day to you, Team Healthy. Glad to see you. Uh, I'm looking at all the comments here that people do before we actually go live on air. And guys, I hope you understand that I so appreciate you being Team Healthy and that you allow me to be a presence in your life. It helps me as much as I hope it helps you. Um, so just please know that. I can't say that strongly enough. Okay, a couple of notes here. Multiples of you yesterday or today have made comments about how much you enjoyed that live interview that I did with Debbie Mirza. And I'm telling you, she knocked the ball out of the ballpark on that one. She is so good. If you haven't seen it, it's the interview where she talks about the covert, passive aggressive narcissist, and she's experienced much of it herself. But then she's written about it, and so if you haven't watched that, please do. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and tell you something that's a little bit vulnerable. Okay. I was watching the tape of it. I actually taped it a couple of weeks ago, and I noticed I kept having a twitch in my eyes as I was talking with her, and that happens to me sometimes when, I mean, it actually has a little OCD element to it. And it happens sometimes when I'm tired. I had not had much sleep before. I mean, I'm not making excuses. It just is. And so it's like, well, there I was with my humanity on display. But nonetheless, Debbie made it a great interview, and I so appreciate it. And we've already sent her a message saying that she's working on a new book, and so we're going to have her back when she has something else on. And she was such a delight. So just know that in our humanity, we bring ourselves to you, and she did such a wonderful job. By the way, about 3 weeks or so ago, I mentioned that I've got a video coming up on projection and how narcissists do that. That's coming up tomorrow. That's October 26th. Those of you who are watching maybe on tape delayed, and the rest of you know our tape delayed thing here. That's what it is, tape delayed, okay? Not digitally delayed, tape delayed. But that's going to be a major one that I'm hoping many of you will be able to gain some insight for itself yourselves. Okay, today the topic that I have kind of focused in on as I've been selecting some of the questions that we have is narcissists don't think in normal terms. One of the biggest problems that I have with individuals, it's kind of funny to put it in the term problems. Sometimes when you, as a person who's trying to be healthy, come in contact with that very unhealthy narcissistic person, you're thinking, well, certain things make sense to me. It would seem to reason that that person would also see how common sense works and how I can perhaps connect with them in that kind of way. And that can become part of your undoing when you want to superimpose normalcy and insight on individuals who are defined by the absence of all of that, then that's when they can pull you down into their hole. And so it's going to be so necessary for you to see how that tendency is there and it's ongoing and it's something that they have brought in from their deep history. There are many reasons that they have that, but we can't really assume that narcissists will have the same goal for normalcy as you do. Now, having said that, and here's part of the crazy making, they think of themselves as the gold standard. It's like, well, if I could just get you to think, well, like me, then problem solved. Everything would be okay. And they have this false self. They have this alternate reality that they live with. They honestly think of themselves as being better than you and superior. That's part of what we mean when we talk about that word narcissism. And it's going to be necessary for you to know that's where they're coming from so that you don't get caught trying to plead your case too much, or you don't get caught trying to force them to have some wisdom and insight that just simply isn't going to be there. Okay, so just know that's what we're dealing with. Now, with no further ado, let's just dive in with our questions here. Okay, the first person, and this one just gets right to the heart of the matter. The first person asked the question, Dr. C, do narcissists realize that you might see how fake they are whenever they put on their mask and love bomb other people, like neighbors, for example, right in front of you? Or do they just kind of forget about that possibility because they're so fixated on getting narcissistic supply from a potentially different source? And then this person goes on to say, my dad has always been real nice toward people outside the house, but treated my mom and I like dirt. Okay. So that we have a couple of questions here. Let's break it down. This person says, do they see how fake they are when they put on that mask? And the answer is nope, they don't see it. Let's keep in mind that as part of their narcissism, there is an element of being self deluded. You've heard me refer many times to the phrase false self. False. Okay. They, way early on, before you ever showed up on the scene, they have concocted this notion that says, well, there's certain things that I want people to see in me. And of course, it's the good stuff. And then there are multiple things that I am not going to allow people to see. In fact, I'm not even going to admit it to myself. For example, if they have a bad temper, or if they lie a lot, or if they're moody or difficult or argumentative, it's like, no, I'm not that way. The only reason that you might think that I am is because you have a problem and you come towards me with all your difficulties. So you're actually the problem. I mean, their delusional thinking goes that far. So when you ask the question, do they know when they're putting on the mask? The answer is no. What they'll say is, "Oh, I finally found someone that I can be nice to. I finally found someone who gets me," and they'll think of it in that kind of way. And when you say that they're love bombing someone like a neighbor, yeah, they probably are, but they'll think, "No, I'm not love bombing it." What do you mean by that? So what they'll do is they'll say, "I'm just a friendly guy. I'm just nice." Now, behind the scenes with the person that has to live with them, it's like, you're a jerk, you're an idiot, you're no good. They criticize, they grumble, they moan, they groan. It's sad to say, but narcissists, because of all of this false self and alternate reality, can predictably show a very, very low level of self awareness. They have very poor insight. Every now and then, I'll have a narcissist that would come into my office. I remember so well this one guy that came in and said, "Oh yeah, I'm a narcissist. My wife has pointed that out to me." And he said, "Well, actually, I'm kind of a sociopath too." And sure enough, when he started describing how he lived his life, it's like, well, bingo, you hit that one. But then, as he had that intellectual awareness, it didn't translate into any kind of internal adjustment, and so its own form of he's kind of BSing himself, so to speak. It's like, well, even if I know it, it doesn't make any difference because I don't care. And that's that low empathy, the low inclination to know how to blend. It's like, if you're going to hang with me, you're just going to have to get used to it. That's the way I am. Sometimes they may have a little bit of awareness like that, but most of them don't even go that far. It's like, well, yeah, there's a problem, all right, in my life, and the problem is you. And so you're going to have to keep that in mind. And then this person asked the question, and kind of in asking the question, they were sort of going towards the real answer when they said, or do they just forget about this and they're fixated on getting narcissistic supply from another source? Bingo, that's it. It's like, oh, I can't necessarily get you inside the house to go along with me, but there's somebody over there. They don't know me as well as you do, and they don't see all my flaws. I got my eye on that person. And so they can be charming, they can be friendly, they can be helpful, they can show interest, but it's part of the act. And then if that person that they're giving all this nice attention to winds up becoming an insider, then the narcissist can't keep the mask up forever. And so it's going to come off. So just know what you're dealing with. All right, now let's go to another question. And this person, and this is a really good question. I'd be curious to know how a therapist such as yourself deals practically in actual verbal responses. So they're putting a challenge on me. How do you deal practically with an individual you're counseling with when they decompose right in your midst? This might help folks. In other words, what do you say to somebody who's just in your office flailing and being angry and they're coming apart and you can just tell that they're so flustered? Well, one of the things I could say is, well, I hope you're happy. That's not going to work. Keep in mind that I'm a therapist, and as best as I can, I'm going to say something, hopefully, fingers crossed, that might cause them to have some sort of a breakthrough. Now, I make the assumption that if that person is in my office, that perhaps maybe They're there in the hope that they could actually learn and they could actually make some adjustments. Many of them, if they're truly narcissistic, they're not going to. But as long as you're in my office, that's what we're going to do. And so I would use comments of a wide variety. For example, if that person is really angry and hurt and frustrated, then I'm going to go inside that person's interior. I'm not saying that you should, but this is what I do as a therapist. I might say something like, "Okay, you've said many things here. The first thing that comes to my mind is you seem like you're in pain." I might say something like that, or I might say something like, "The anger is what we see on the outside, but you're hurting, and it's coming. That hurt is coming through in a pretty ugly way. Can we slow down and figure out what's the hurt? What's the pain that's going on?" Now, almost inevitably, close to 100% of the time, that person is not going to say, "Hey, good point, doc. Let's go into that space." Instead, what they'll say is, "Yeah, if I'm hurting, it's because that idiot over there. It's because of this person in my past." And they'll go straight into the what we call victim shaming. I'm being really ugly and mean and angry, but that person over there is the one who's got the problem. And so typically they don't necessarily go into that space with me, but I'm at least going to give them the invitation to do so. Or another thing that I might say is, "I know that you have some goals in mind when you say you don't like this and you'd prefer that, and you're really upset because of this. Let's take a look at your strategy." Let's just ask just a very practical question. How well is your strategy working? Are you happy now? Are you satisfied that this is going to get you to a good place? And of course, it kind of puts them on the spot. Typically, they'll go back and they'll do the victim shaming again. But then my question is, let's come back. Let's look at the strategy. Is this working very well? And I want them to see, you're trying this technique, if you will, and it's not working very well. And then I might go a little bit further. And I might say to that loud, blustery person, I might say something like, "Let's underscore one truth, and that is harshness is always an option." That's something you can do. Now, if there's somebody else in the room, they're thinking, "Doc, don't say that." But then what I'm going to do is, what I'm doing is, I'm letting them know you're a free agent. Anything and everything is available to you. And then we go back to, now let's take a look at what the predictable results are going to be when you go into the space that you are. Or I might even go a little bit further and ask, "I know that you've mentioned that you have some anger issues. Is this something that you want to hold on to for perpetuity, or would you like to change?" So I'll make these kind of comments. And as a therapist, that's how my mind naturally takes me. Every now and then, it all depends on how far down the spectrum that person is of narcissism. A person will slow down in their tracks, and it's like, okay, this is a therapeutic atmosphere, and this is where we get to look at these kind of things. I'm going to think carefully. Let's go into that space. When I say every now and then, the possibilities are pretty low. Most of the time, they're so busy deflecting, keeping in mind that they have a pathological defensiveness that's part of their personality, that even someone like myself, if I'm trying to present myself as reasonable, as willing to talk with them, as and willing to dive in with insightful discussions, most of them are at such an immature place in their own personal life that they're not able to go into that. So, but the person asked the question, when you have somebody that's just falling apart right there in your office, how would you deal with it? That's what I would do. Now, might you do that with somebody in your personal life? If you have let's say, a parent who yells at you, or a living partner, a sibling, or somebody at work, and might you say those things? "I can tell you're in pain," or "You seem to be hurt. Tell me more about that, because I'm willing to go into that space." Or keep in mind that your harshness is not, I mean, you can say all those things, and it's up to you. But again, we have to remember that's a reasonable approach when we talk to people like that. Narcissists, by definition, don't use good reasoning. And so we have a disparity right there, right up front. But nonetheless, at least I'm going to make the possibility there. Okay. Yeah. Taking it a little bit further, this next person asked the question, you have mentioned how narcissists don't like to enter into their pain. Pause right there. What I mean by that is when you're hurt or when you're angry, when you're disappointed, that reflects the type of pain that you're carrying on the inside. When you're yelling and all, when you're defensive, it's like, oh, something's going on there. And one of the things I've mentioned is that narcissists don't want to go into that space and say, I need to listen to what my emotions or what my thoughts are trying to teach me. They don't do that. So this person says, you mentioned how narcissists don't like to enter into their pain. That got me wondering in general, based on your experience, do vulnerable narcissists have an easier time entering into others' pain than malignant narcissists? And we're going to have, let's see, I think I have another. Yeah, I've got another question on the malignant narcissist. I'm going to hold off on that one. Let's focus on that vulnerable narcissist. There are some people who will say you have overt narcissists and you have covert narcissists, and a covert narcissist is also known as the vulnerable narcissist. And in my experience, if they want to challenge me, that's fine. It's like, nope, vulnerable narcissists inevitably are covert, but not all covert narcissists are vulnerable narcissists. Okay, so there's a distinction. The vulnerable narcissist is someone who is prone towards pouting and sulking, and they have a way of draining the energy from the room just by showing up. You know, when you are with that person, that vulnerable narcissist, and you say, "How's it going?" It's like, yeah, okay, and so they just tend to be moody and general. And so, whereas the covert narcissist may be the one that's helping out in the kitchen, or they're friendly, or they may ask questions, the vulnerable narcissist won't do that. The covert's just keeping it disguised. So, that vulnerable narcissist can be a very baffling and draining kind of person in the sense that they just kind of have this Eeyore kind of mindset, woe is me. And so the question is, do they have an easier time entering into your pain? And the answer is no. No, they're still true to the definition of narcissism. They're consumed with themselves, and so they'll let you know life isn't going very well. Yeah, the old remember the Saturday Night Live Debbie Downer. You're saying something like, "Hey, I went to my favorite vacation place," and Debbie Downer might say something like, "Yeah, I got diarrhea there once." So they bring in all this negativity, and so it's like, never mind. I'm sorry I mentioned it. And so they don't enter into your space. They just kind of stay stuck in their woe is me kind of a mentality. And just because they definitely feel their pain and they let everybody know my life isn't going very well. I'm moody, I'm depressed. But they're so busy going into that space that they don't think like you. Let's keep in mind, narcissists don't think normally. And so you're assuming, well, if you can access how you're hurting, which they'll let you know, it doesn't necessarily translate into them showing empathy toward you. Okay. Okay. Another question, and this is kind of succinct, but this is a good question as well. This person asked, what is this shame that narcissists have? Where does it come from? Now, you'll hear people like me and some of the others that I respect on YouTube and in their writings and all talk about how narcissism has a very strong shame component. And many of them, particularly the overts, but the coverts, they can come across as though, hey, I got life by the tail. I'm doing fine. Everything's great. Yeah, I've got some morons in my life, but my way of dealing with all of that is just dismiss them. And they don't necessarily reveal that they're feeling shame. But the way you know that they're really, really struggling with shame, and I have some notes. I think I've showed you. I've got a whole stack of papers here. I've got some notes on actually how you can learn how to see into a narcissist's self-loathing. You'll notice that narcissists will not, and when I say will not, capital, all caps across the board there. They will not let you know what their failings are. Or if they do let you know what their failings are, it's so they can complain about the person who made them miserable. But they can't go into a space that says, yeah, I'm a mistake maker and sometimes I blunder, because that would bring shame upon them. Narcissists inevitably, like you and me, because I had this when I was growing up, I'm sure you did, they're exposed to the judgment system. There's a grading system out there. And when you're very early, very young in your life, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, you realize that whatever you think, say, and do, somebody's going to stick a grade on it. And they're going to tell you if it's good or excellent or wonderful or terrible. And so that budding little narcissist may not have had permission to say, hey, let's talk about this. And they may not have had anybody say, let's walk through this in a way where we can find some sort of relief. That little child who later on can become a narcissist begins realizing, oh, so when you see me do this instead of this, you're going to grade me, aren't you? You're going to judge me. And so they learn to figure out how to be competitive and have an edge. Okay, well, what that means is I'm not going to let you see what's wrong with me, because they don't want you to know that. And they get to the point where they dread anyone finding out who they are and how they struggle. They can't admit their own failings or inadequacies, like me admitting sometimes when I'm tired, I have a little twitch in my eye. And so that's like, no, that doesn't sound good. And so it's their way of saying, I'm in total cover-up mode. So when you ask, where's the shame is them saying, I've got too strong of a grading system inside of me that was applied to me by many, many other people out there. And it's that grading system that I consult constantly. And I know that if you know A, B, and C about me, you're going to be down on my case. I hate that part of me. Therefore, I'm not going to acknowledge it, period, end of discussion. That's the shame. That's the origin. And healthy individuals can say, you know what? If you get to know me, you're going to see that I have flaws. And I'm willing to work on that. I'm willing to acknowledge it. I'm willing to say, here's who I am. But at the same time, I don't feel like I have to carry shame because of it. It's just like, this is something else. For the rest of my life, I'll have many something else's that I can work on so that I can make improvements. Healthy people do that. Narcissists are not normal enough. They're not healthy enough to be able to go into that space. That's their shame. That's their self-loathing. Now, another question. And again, this is probably one of the more common ones that I receive. So I thought it would bear repeating if you've heard this before. This person says, Dr. C, can a narcissist be both grandiose and covert at the same time? And then this person goes on to say, my friend, in quotation marks, and then in parentheses, I'm the only one she had left, although I don't really consider her a friend. My friend is definitely grandiose, but she employs some very sneaky strategies. Are they always like that? And the answer is, well, always, I don't know. But very, very, very commonly, they'll employ both. Uh, a good way of putting it is this. Many of you know that I have a history of conducting anger workshops, and I've written on anger. If you've not read the book, The Anger Trap, it's one of my books. I really like the way that book came out. What I explain is that when you have problems or issues with anger, it can come out in many different ways. Some people will hold it in, they'll suppress it. Some people will be openly aggressive and brash and loud and harsh. Some people will be passive aggressive, the withdrawal, the punishment by silence and things like that. And then some people will hold on to grudges and contempt. There are all sorts of options that people have in the categories. And no one person is going to just pick one of those dysfunctional ways and say, yeah, that's mine. Typically, when people are angry, they can be all over the board with all of that. Now, let's take that same style of thinking and apply it to narcissism. Are narcissists who can be very overt, are they just overt and that's it? No, they can also be covert. They can also do blame shifting. They can also have the tendency to hide and not let you know what's going on in their life. And they can be all over the board because it's just there's so many options that they have. It's like, I'll take all of them. And so, yes, if you have an overt narcissist, sometimes they can be very covert. So a lot of times, if you have a covert narcissist, they can be more overt from time to time, but they tend not to go more in that dimension as much because it's like I've watched those people and it tends to get them in trouble. And so covert narcissists are more sneaky and they're more sly and deliberate. But the bottom line is there are many ways that it can play out, and it's going to show up typically in any one of them in a wide array of behaviors. It's not just one fixed category. So it just gives you that much more that you have to know and understand and realize. Okay. Okay. The next question. And again, this is another really good one. This person says, why are we always the ones who have to handle these narcissistic people with kid gloves? Okay, great question. So here you are, you're saying, okay, Dr. C, you've got this whole channel and all these videos and articles, etc., courses and all that are dedicated to the survivors of narcissistic abuse. Well, what about them? Why is it that we're the ones that have to put in all of the work? And then this person goes on to say, I listen to your videos all the time and you give helpful advice, and in parentheses, thank you. But I noticed how it's us who have the real responsibility of having to try to heal these broken relationships. And then the question is, what's going on there? Now, there's a compliment in here toward you when you say, well, I guess if anything's going to happen, if a healing is going to happen, I'm going to have to take the initiative. The compliment is, yeah, you have the capacity, you have the skill set that might go into it. The analogy that I try to use is, let's say that you have a person that has a PhD in mathematics. Okay, let's take it even further. They're able to go into quantum physics and they can explain the string theory and they know all sorts of things about math, and they're just geniuses. And then that person comes across another individual who is 8 years old and in the third grade, and they're just they've just figured out their addition and subtraction, and now they're trying to figure out maybe a little bit of the multiplication table. And that person with the PhD in mathematics is thinking, I need to get this kid that's in the third grade to think like me. It's not going to happen, is it? And by definition, you have one person that's just not very well developed, and you have another person that's extremely well developed, and there's a huge disparity there. And so that person with the PhD in mathematics is going to say, well, if I'm going to talk math to this person, I'm going to have to go down on the third grade level and explain things to them in that kind of way. Now, that's a bit of an exaggerated kind of analogy, but I think you can see where I'm going. Here you are, you're on YouTube and you're watching good old Les Carter, and you're trying to figure out, what's making these people the way they are? What kind of insight? Hey, give me a book, or let me read some articles, or I'll take a course. I really want to learn. And then you look over to that narcissistic person and say, please join me. And by definition, it's like, I'm not going to join you. Why would I join you? You're just a chump. Keeping in mind that they think of themselves as falsely superior. They have no particular need to empathize with you or to tune into what you say. They're just defined by their own selfishness, their need to control. And of course, if they say, yeah, I need some help, that means they let go of their control. They lose their power. And so you're asking that narcissist to come join you, and in the psychological realm, saying, that does sound curious to me, and I really want to learn. I want to grow. The reason they don't is because these are people who have arrested development. You've heard the term fixation. That was a Freudian term. You may be all the way up in your adult forms of development, where you're going deep into insight and wisdom and empathy, and you really can see through certain veneers. And that narcissist who may be 46 years old is like, well, actually, I'm still thinking like that third grader. And you're wanting me to come up to your level? Nah, it's not going to work. And so you wind up, if you're going to deal with them, you have to talk with them in terms that they can understand. And I go back to my opening comments. One of the biggest mistakes that you can make is you can assume that these are people that can have normalcy, just like you're trying to seek normalcy. And you have to remind yourself, narcissism is not a healthy pattern. It's a pattern of dysfunction. It's a character disorder, and many individuals tend to stay so stuck in it that they can go to their dying day and they just don't figure it out. Every now and then some do, Most don't. Sometimes they have a crisis, or sometimes a little maturity begins to kick in. And again, it depends on how deep they are in the spectrum. And so you have to remind yourself, why is it me? And the answer is, well, high compliment to you, because you're a person that likes to think and they're not. Well, why can't they do it? That's almost an empty question. They don't. And well, how can I make them? You can't. Which leads me to my next question. Okay. Now, this person apparently is in a newer kind of relationship. And this individual says, how can a narcissist even grasp the idea that they're controlling other people when they're so entrenched with the concept that they are the victim? And then this person goes on to say, I hope you answer this question, Doc, because I'm really confused how to make my boyfriend go to therapy, let alone make him aware. Okay, so you have this young lady who has a new boyfriend. And apparently, she's the kind of person that says, oh, I love talking about personal things, and I like talking about growth and what it means to be healthy. And then when you're in that stage of a relationship where you're trying to figure out what your future is going to look like, obviously, to her credit, it's like, well, let's just talk about the hard stuff, and let's put ourselves out there on the table and discuss pluses and minuses, pros and cons, who you are, what you believe. And then this person is realizing, well, every time I talk to my boyfriend about those kind of topics, that person just kind of plays the victim. Well, yeah, I've got some hurt in my life, and it's because my mother, or it's because my girlfriend, or it's because these people in my childhood were so mean to me, or it's because I gave myself over to a job and they fired me anyway. Or it's always someone else's fault. And so, whenever they're talking about their problems and seemingly being personable with you, they're not. They're simply rehearsing in their mind, the reason that I have problems is due to all the idiots that are around me. And so this individual is saying, well, how do I get that person to reflect on themselves? Great question. And then how do I make them? That's what her terminology. How can I make my boyfriend go to therapy, and then let alone make him become aware? And the answer is, you don't. As that girlfriend who's maybe looking down the road towards a potential future, what you do want to do is express your beliefs and your preferences and your convictions, and you want to ask the penetrating questions. Let's talk about, when you and I have these anger moments, or when we get frustrated, or when we are defensive, or you mentioned that there were some things with a past relationship, or with your family of origin. Let's talk about the meaning of that. And you want to go into a thoughtful, insightful kind of a space. But it's the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. You're making the assumption that they can have that insight. And part of the definition of narcissism is the inability to have insight. And I've used this analogy before, but it bears repeating. I've come to the conclusion, and we're going to get into this in just a second. I've come to the conclusion that some individuals just have it. And by that, I mean the capacity for insight. I remember when I was a little kid, if an adult said something to me that had a personal dimension to it, it'd be like, oh, I like hearing that. I like thinking about it. And for whatever reason, that was in me when I was a child. I loved it. I ate it up. And as I got older, when I was a kid, I'd usually read about one book a week. And I'd always pick biographies or history books. I don't know if any of you remember the We Were There books. And I liked reading about human experiences and people and all. And I'd have friends, it's like they wouldn't get anywhere close to that. They'd want to do other things. Well, that was just in me. I'm hardwired that way. And some of you may be hardwired that way. Other individuals, it's like, no comprende. I don't think like that. It doesn't even cross my mind. And so you can't make a person want insight. What you can do is make it available. And then in this woman's case, it'd be like, if you continue to make these options available, and that person continues to play the victim role, and they won't get out of it, and they won't go into your space with you, then you have to start asking the question, why am I in this relationship then? Because if it's this way now, think about it 5 and 10 years down the road. Whatever inequity you're feeling now is going to be more down the road Is this a relationship that you need to commit to for a long, long period of time? And this is a super big red flag. And so know that if you continue to go further and if you have to force feed somebody awareness and insight, it's not going to work. Do not assume that another person has that same desire as you would have. Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago we had a question about malignant narcissism, and here we go with this. This person says, "Do you think that a malignant narcissist is able to radically accept everything around them and start changing themselves?" Okay, the answer is no, 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 no. Did I say that clearly enough? No. Can a malignant narcissist have radical acceptance of the world in front of them to the extent that they begin changing themselves? When we talk about the malignant narcissist, on that scale of narcissism, if we were to go from zero, and nobody, by the way, is down at zero, and no narcissistic tendencies whatsoever, and we go all the way up to 100, and that's the far end where the narcissism completely consumes them. The malignant narcissist by definition is in that top 10 percentile and beyond. These are individuals who have so turned off any need to know from you. There's a mean spirit. They have zero need for empathy. And when I say zero, I mean below zero. They don't want to know what you feel beyond being able to figure out how to manipulate and exploit you. And so when you have somebody that's that malignant and they just go that far down there, it's just so deeply entrenched in their character that you can't expect anything other than what they present to you. It's the old Maya Angelou, Maya Angelou, who says, when somebody shows you who they are, believe it. In a case like this, that's exactly what we're talking about. They can have high IQ, but that doesn't necessarily translate into emotional intelligence. Intelligence, and they would just step all over that and say, "I don't need that crap anyway." They're just mean, and they're committed to it, and they do not care. Now, this takes us to another question, which is very similar, and this person asks, "How do you feel about the fact that a narcissist is no more making the choice to be narcissistic than a depressed person is making the choice to be depressed?" Well, first of all, we're talking about apples and oranges. Narcissism is a character disorder. Depression is a mood disorder. Okay, the big distinction there. And some individuals with depression, they have various reasons to be that way. They may have some circumstances in their life that warrant a depressed feeling, frankly. Or they may have some biochemical issues that inhibit them from being able to access the joy, etc. I'm a bit conflicted about, do narcissists have choices to be what they are, or is just this something the way they are? Studies will show us that about 50%. There's one lady that she's been doing twin studies and sibling studies and personality inventories, etc., and has concluded with a great deal of research in her team. And she said between 40 and 60% of your personality is pretty hardwired. So I just kind of split it in the middle. I say, or let's just call it half. About half of your personality is simply hardwired into you. And then the rest is given to you by environmental influences, etc. But you see, even then, the environment can pick up on that 50% that you're hardwired toward and can respond because of that. For example, if you have an oppositional child, then the parent or teachers or friends are going to respond to that oppositional child in ways that they're not going to respond to a calm child. And so it actually reinforces what's already there. And so many of these people who have strong narcissistic bent have been this way for so long, they tend to have a leaning in that direction anyway. And then the environment can play into it that they're just there. And this is important for many of you who have, let's say, a son or a daughter who may have developed some really strong narcissistic tendencies. And you think, where did I go wrong? And we're not going to lay all the blame at the feet of mom and dad and the family system. Sometimes it's like, well, some people are they're so inclined toward that unfortunately, and my heart goes out to them that they, they're that way and they're going to continue to be that way. Now, having said that, I do, and then this is where the conflict comes up inside of me. there is choice still. Most people, even though they can have a strong narcissistic bent, know that telling lies is not a good thing, for example, or screaming at the top of your lungs is not going to be a good strategy unless you're just trying to totally intimidate someone. And so they know basic right versus wrong at an intellectual level. But then the question is, have they so shut down the empathy feature? Have they shut down the connected level of engagement with other individuals that they just don't care? And some of that can I think be changed, but with many of them it won't. I spoke with a professional not that long ago, and frankly, I was kind of surprised by the naivete of that person. That person was saying, "Well, you get anybody that's going to go to counseling, get them a good counselor. They can change. They'll change." And so, people that say narcissists can't change, I think that's just they're just they're quitters. They just have given up, and I don't give up on people. And I'm thinking, well, I don't think that you've been in the same therapy office I've been in, because I know there's some individuals, there'd be some individuals that would come into my office, and I would work as hard as I can. I try to get insights, and they'd walk away, and I'd know, well, it's going to be the same old, same old. So they made me look like a failure. And then other folks would come into my office. We'd talk about some similar kind of patterns, and they'd walk out of there and they'd make me look like a genius, because it's like, I was waiting for someone to talk with me about this. I'm so pleased. And sometimes it's not me, it's not my efforts, it's just who they are and what they bring. Sometimes there's choice, sometimes there's not. And there are times when it's just like, well, the bottom line is I have to just go with what's in front of me. Okay, now let's go with one more question and see where this takes us. This person says, are covert narcissists consciously aware that they're covert narcissists? Are the schemes that you mentioned conscious or premeditated? The general rule is covert narcissists. If you were to say, hey, I kind of get the sense that you're a covert narcissist, if you say that to them, they look at you, most of them, when I say most, 99%, like you have three eyeballs, like, no, that's not. If there's a narcissist in the room, it's you. And that's a very common thing for them. I can't tell you how many times people will ask me, am I the narcissist here? Because that person's been telling me that. And if you're asking that question, usually that's a good sign, because that implies that you care and you're thinking, and you want to, if it's true, you want to probe and you want to figure out how to deal with it. Covert narcissists are so dedicated to phoniness, fake, cover up, sneaky behaviors, that the first person that they've faked out is not you, it's themselves. And so, in order for them to be good at being a covert narcissist, they have to convince themselves, well, I really am better than everybody else. And so, if you come along and suggest otherwise, clearly you don't know what you're talking about. That's what you're dealing with. So we go back to our theme that we have here today, and that is narcissists don't think in normal terms. And you so want them to do so. And again, kudos to you when you say, but I really want to be that kind of person that seeks wisdom. I want to be the kind of person that if you find something that's inappropriate, tell me about it. I'll listen to you carefully. And I'm thinking, oh, we so need more people like that. And I'm going to go and give you one last kind of thought that I've mentioned before. It's my conviction that maybe 20% of the population is intuitive enough to say, I really want to change. And I have my reasons for going into that 20% range. It may be 23%, it may be 17%, but I just say that. And there are just a lot of folks that they may not be pathological, but they just don't think. I mean, think about when you go to the grocery store and you see a lot of folks. I do this sometimes. Does that person think about the meaning of life? And how many of these folks that never even crosses their mind? Well, that means that there are a lot of people out there that don't really think very deeply. And then you have some, and I don't know what the percentage is, but it's pretty far down there, who are just like, if I have pathology, I don't care. It's not my fault. You did it. And they're not going to adjust. Or there can be some folks that'll say, yeah, I have anger issues. I have depression. I know that I'm mean sometimes. And then they'll say, but I don't think I can do it. And of course, they sabotage themselves before they even get off the ground. Any way you look at it, though, you want to recognize, unfortunately, that's a very real phenomenon. And I'm going to do the work with the one person that I know, and that's going to be myself. And then if that's the case, that the narcissist wants to join me, that would be wonderful. But if they don't, I'm going to continue my forward projection. Okay. All right. This is a tough one, but this whole session we've had here today very much gets to the heart of the matter. I hope it gives you good food for thought. Once again, I want to reaffirm I so appreciate Team Healthy, and I mean that all the way down to the core of my being. Thank you for letting me be on your journey with you. I hope that this gives you some hope for yourself, and in the process, I hope that you find peace. Have a good rest of the week. I'll see you next time. Put your questions down below and I'll pick up on them. We'll do it again next week. See you then, Team Healthy. Bye.